I'm Wendy Faith Usher from the English Department, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the first Symposium of Southern Alberta Poetry held here at the University of Lethbridge. This event has two parts. So first, each poet will read for under 10 minutes, and then we'll take a 15-minute break, followed by a discussion period which will explore the theme of bearing witness, and that will be moderated by Whetstone Magazine's Jamie Wong. Now, our first performer is not here. He's running a little late, so we're going to start with Allie, who is both a poet and a dramatist. Allie Riley, who likes to shapeshift and time travel in her books, and her latest collection of poetry is called 33 Million Solitudes by Frontenac House.
Thank you, Wendy. It's great that you organized this. Great to be here. And what a good crowd. So, I'm going to start off by reading a quick poem from 33 Million Solitudes. And it's called Instructions to a Mail-Order Bride, the Solitude of a Fille de Roi. House rules. Pack lynx pelts in a belly full of salted reindeer. Make the bed carefully, like an undertaker. There are scrub brushes for everything. Attack your teeth as zealously as you scour your bed sheets. Blood will be generated. Blood will be eradicated. All evidence must be removed. This is Dogtown, plenty of holes. The ground is covered with artifacts. Ignore them. The rollaway cot folds in on itself, a misery taco. Curse that toad peasant you bought beer for, the one who stretched caution tape between you and the life you wanted, who denied you a ride to the multiplex, left you dirt-bound and sniffly clutching a slice of bread. But remember, 2 nights will buy a pair of red shoes. Claim diplomatic immunity when caught with the meat in your mouth. And don't worry about the sheets. I'll make them clean it up. They don't speak English anyway. This one's called Hausfrau. I was lucky enough to win a contest with Walrus Magazine and the SLS and got to go to St. Petersburg for 6 weeks. Somehow this came out of that. I'm not really sure how, but Hausfrau. Women decorate with an eye on how the world should be. Mother of pearl, arms of Mary, what is worse than the dresser-top detritus of a man? His clutter is driving me mad. While he works out of town, I redecorate. I want magic. I fuss around altars. I arrange things, a pebble, a smudge stick, heads of the Virgin. I place bits of bone, secondhand fur, and nana bling, and put glitter everywhere. It's kind of embarrassing, but I like to decorate and cook. It's something I really know how to do, and growing up in my family, it was not considered a decent thing for a woman to want to be. Men decorate with representations of themselves, and see, that's what guys don't understand. You wonder why your girl roommate keeps moving your plastic Frankenstein toy back to your bedroom, even though it's the only object that's yours in this realm of pink fluff and faux surfaces. That plastic toy, it's so male, so clearly you, monster hands held helpless in front of your face. Well-meaning kitten strangler, unwitting child murderer. You call. The date is made. I wait on the back porch. I practice meditation, though I'm not fit to breathe. My throat seizes with larcenous wow and flutter. My heart pounds like a shoplifter as I maintain outward silence and try to fight the gibbering innards of monkey mind. The lady next door waters her astroturf while I wait for you. She sprays the sidewalks, goes to the bay window, and polishes her Hummel figurines, 2 Dutch children kissing. They remind her of the old country, the distance between this and that, a place where everyone behaves behind lace curtains, a flat earth world outside these treacherous ranges. We're triple digit, triple threat, man-eater and lady killer. Cannibal and felon, both former addicts to the playing field. We left the wide world of sport long ago, but today we are champions. So I've been thinking a lot about the bearing witness portion theme. So I'm going to read, and it made me think about my first book, which had a lot to do with bearing witness of various kinds. It's a lot about being a teenage runaway. We witnessed a lot. And this is my last one. It's called Ghost Daughter. You can't talk to your daughter. She rolls her eyes, she looks daggers, she screams, "You hypocrite! This is stolen land!" Her scars are a drug. Nothing stops the blood in her head like letting it flow. Across to show, down to go. Ladders up her arms, her legs, ladders to her head, ladders to her heart, her wrists, her ankles, down her right thigh a graceful, not quite healed snake. She's traded her birthright for a beat she can dance to, a dark corner, crimson tide, X carved through a new pair of tights. She fondles a matchbook. If she were a boy, she might try bar fights or arson, but she's a girl, so she takes it out on the nearest available bit of flesh. A delicate operation, opening yourself to pins and needles, to the harsh white light of a small porcelain room. She's indestructible, they say. She couldn't destroy herself even if she tried, and try she does, fitting and gnashing, sexing the chaos. You thought you saw her, creeping into the master bedroom, knife between her teeth, leading an army of vengeful children. The nation's bathrooms are full. Adolescents acting out a dimly remembered ascetic past. They are possessed, overcome. Their bodies host old souls, an angry tribe centuries dead. They are fasting, seeing visions, bloodletting. A sleeping shaman lies in your bathtub. As he opens one eye, he whispers, "We shall live again." You can't talk to your daughter. She runs the gauntlet from back door to bedroom. She shoots through the family room like an arrow, wearing that jacket you despise, a ghost shirt, deflecting your gaze, your questions. Her door slams upstairs. Artillery music begins. Bass, bass, bass. Now her footsteps, they're dancing, dancing like a warrior. Thank you.
Our next performer, Ken Sears, is a well-known labor activist originally from Nanton. Recently retired, he's now back in university, figuring out how to be an artist with working class identifications in a capitalist economy. So please welcome Ken Sears.
God, that sounded pompous. Okay, my father spent the last year and a half of his life in the Scandicare in Vulcan, slowly shutting down. And every time you go over there, it was like watching an old house, and every time you went up to visit him, there was like one more light had turned off and one more room. And the last Christmas before he died, I was up there on Christmas Eve, and I was coming back to Lethbridge, and I passed a hearse going the other way. And I thought, well, that's a hell of a job I'd be having this time of year, especially tonight. So that's what this poem comes out of, that and Hank Williams' song, I See the Light. It's called Driving the Hearse. Exhaust spirals up as each car passes, blooms and is gone in the winter air. Passing travelers stare. We are a source of disquiet. A patch of ice in the headlights glare, skid lights through the dead ditch grasses. This is not the time for reminders of mortality. Traveling through the dead of winter, the returning sun will, in time, disinter the dormant root. The children of the dead shall stir, push forth, splinter the casket and shake themselves free. But not now, not tonight. Tonight we are unwelcome strangers at the feast. Some say the dead have been released as though life were a lake-hold trap. Jaws closed on some dumb suffering beast. Death forces the jaws, the dead take flight. Could I do as I pleased, I'd not be on this road tonight. The first hard flakes are sifting on the wind, quick hard gusts of snow. The light has thinned, the pavement along the crown is grayed with frost. When God made winter, the devil grinned. Somewhere ahead, the lights of home are shining bright. Could I do as I pleased, I'd not be on this road tonight. This night, tonight, is no night for the dead. Who wakes the dead? For whom is the feast spread? Tonight they light no candles for the corpse. Tonight they celebrate the living in that bed. What child is born to guide us through this night? Okay, this one, I spent most of my adult life as a union hack, when working for Canada Post and fighting them every inch of the way. And I worked with a lot of really strong women, a lot of really good sisters, and so this is dedicated to them. It's called The Devil Had a Daughter. They threw me in the river and I walked upon the water. Believe me when I tell you, the devil had a daughter. Call me Lilith, call me Eve, call me the Pharaoh's daughter. I danced all night at the wedding dance. I turned that wine to water. I went up on the mountain and there I first threw the stone. I lit a smoke on the burning bush. The devil's daughter rolls her own. Call me Lilith, call me Eve, call me the pillar of salt. I looked ahead and I looked behind. Was that some kind of fault? I rode out the storm and I swam through the flood. I painted the town with my own pot of blood. Call me Lilith, call me Eve, Salome, and Delilah. I danced for my amusement, and I turned the night to fire. Black as the raven and white as the dove, the fire by night and the rainbow above. Call me Lilith, call me Eve, Magdalene, and Mary. I wash the feet of those I choose, and all my dead I bury. A fox in the cornfield, a lamb meek and mild, I misled the searchers, and I saved the child. Call me Lilith, call me Eve, call me risen, call me fallen. I know my mind as well as yours. I'll not come to your calling. I never knew my father. I'm told he favored sons. Me, I'm just getting started. Well, my brother's been and gone. So that's, as I say, for a lot of the sisters out there, a lot of people doing really hard work to make this a better world. This one's called Gin and Fentanyl, and it's not completed, but it comes out of a whole number of different places. Skulking through the bush around the dump sites. The late spring snow did for the berry crop in the high country. The bears drifted down to lower elevations. By late summer, they were raiding the old orchards, scrounging in the open dumps along the lake. They denned up for the winter, got comfortably settled in, and never went back up. The dump sites were a free lunch counter and a breeding ground. The bear population jumped and jumped again. Although they never gave out a number, there's a picture of the Selmo dump in about 1963. The garbage was piled 3 stories high. The bears would lumber up out of the bush, all caution gone, root through the pile and hunker down to feed. For every bear you see, there were at least another 3 in the vicinity. That year, they strung chain link and fenced the dumps. There were 52 bear in that picture. Word came down from the ministry. The forestry shut the gates and shot every bear they could see. 100 years ago and more, from Memphis down along the river, the sporting men in their box-back shoots with the red lights shining from their heels like they walked over the coals of hell. The swagger they're going out in style. The music of the jazz bands lining out behind the 6 white horses. Life's bad odds. Let it end fierce and wild. Better go out behind a horn, moaning like a highball northbound freight than broken and bleeding, pleading for mercy like a helpless child. They turned on one another. You don't need to be wearing shackles to feel the weight. 2 centuries and an ocean away, the undeserving poor of London swarmed like rats in the gin lane killing pits. The winnowing of every manor and village swept into the stews and brawled and clawed and died in droves from gin and plague and the hangman's noose. Life worth less than a cambric square hanging from the sleeve of a gentleman's coat. God's in his heaven. All's right with the world. The poor were created for the gentry's use. They savaged each other. You needn't be a pit bull to feel the teeth sink in your throat. Outside the Main Street bars and pawn shops in Winnipeg's North End, they're hanging on, waiting for an opportunity, killing time before time kills them. The wolf packs and the wolverines, emaciated, gaunt, and lame, fend for themselves in foreign territory. The question's not if, it's when. The land got trapped and hunted out. What predators survived took to robbing caches and skulking through the bush around the dump sites, scavenging what they could find, starvation dulling natural caution, a few fading back into the forest, the rest subsisted on rotting meat. Despite what was said, there would be no going back. Many of the words were already lost. The traditional skills failed changing needs. The dump was ringed with chain link, and dump was linked with chain rig. No, I've lost it. It happens to the worst of us. Okay, the dump was ringed with chain link, mesh, and razor wire. There was no need to set out poison bait. The strongest of the starving feeds upon the rest. They prowl and snarl in the smoky lights of garbage fires. They quarrel and claw for dominance on the slopes of the smoking pile. Take a look at the faces below the gibbets as the horn plays high and higher. I'm not saying that I like it. I'm trying not to choke on my own bile. Take a look at the faces below the gibbets as the horn plays high and higher. There's an avid fascination, not just the rage of the mob, but an almost sexual desire. Life will not be denied. Hornmen, fiddlers, the devil's own because God denied them. Hanged men and fighting cocks, dogs and rats set upon another in the pit. Wolves in a trap will gnaw their legs, starving in a cage. They tear at one another. They snarl and curse and howl. The pious turn away. The fine gentlemen scowl and condemn a badly managed execution. He danced around and he pranced around, and the fiddle he played gaily. So rantingly, so dauntingly, so wantonly played he, and he ne'er won the heart of a lady. And I think that just did my time, so thank you very much.
Richard has now joined us, thankfully. He has published an incredible 31 books since 1984. His most recent titles are Rock, Scissors, Paper, The Clifford Olson Murders, and A Gaggle of Geese.
My apologies to everyone for arriving late. This is the day my watch battery decided to die. I've got 25 after 12 right now, so I was actually early. So my apologies for that. Well, when Wendy suggested that the topic be bearing witness, I thought, well, you know, the thing that I bore witness to the most was living in Africa, and I didn't think any of the other folks here would touch that country, or Nigeria anyway. So I'm going to be reading from my first book, and then I'm going to finish up with a children's poem. I'll explain when we get there. So I was living in Maiduguri, which is the northeastern capital of Borno State in Nigeria, which has recently been taken over by Boko Haram, if you're following the news. You remember all the girls that got abducted? Some of them have been returned, thanks to the Nigerian army, which is kind of slow. But they're still crowding around the small areas around it. And, obviously I'm concerned. My friends, I lived there for 2 years. This is a true story. This is called He Thinks He's a Cat. And it starts off with an epigraph. Does a tiger need to mule its tigritude? Outside the West End Club in Bew, he picks up a scent. Perhaps he's become a hyena, circling some carrion thought we cannot know. He finds still water there. He does not get down on all fours to mule his tigritude. If he does, his cry is real enough. His skittishness is that of a cat that has dodged rocks before. Whatever scraps of words we throw, he will dodge first, return to later. They do not lock them up here. He is no nation's pet, pads out the perimeter of our fear, lovingly carries his own shadow by the nape of its scruffy neck. Another true story about building conditions and the problems with trying to get people not to cheat on the ingredients. It's called I'll huff and I'll puff. This building inspector's honest, takes one look at the structure and shakes his head in disgust. All right, Abu Bakr, he says, I'll make you a deal, but only this once. Go get me a building block, drop it here on the sidewalk from a height of 4 feet. If it breaks, I'll condemn the building. If it doesn't break, I'll pass it. That's the best I can do for you. And with that, Abu Bakr nods, bows politely, and shuffles off, returns walking tall, carrying an exemplary block like a tea tray before him, stumbles and falls. The block flies from his hands, crumbles like shortbread on impact with sand. That doesn't count! It wasn't 4 feet! It wasn't 4 feet! One of the things, I stayed at the Lake Jad Hotel before they found us a place to reside, and there are lots of traders around the hotels trying to sell their wares, and in particular this one fellow was trying to sell me a set of python skins. So I'll try and, there's a few words you'll need to understand. The word bature is Hausa for white person or European on tour. Oga is the equivalent in Yoruba. Naira is the currency. And I think that's about it. Chop is food or to eat. I'll try and ham it up a little bit. So there's two voices here. There's the thoughts of the white man, and then in the middle there is a monologue in Pidgin English. It's called Hunting Pythons. Are there a lot of snakes around here? How do you catch them when they're so big and dangerous, I ask, slowly sliding my wallet out. Make you wait sometimes. No fraid. They know they bite with you too much. Make them swallow kamsa. Dem eyes no be good too much. I think you sabi, ba? Make you hide for grass. You come out your arm kamsa. Dem go smell 'em chop. Then they come. No fraid. Na grease. Your arm no go stay in him belly. You hold him handle tight too much. Him blade be rest for arm. He be no problem. So knife is along here. You dey cut him for inside. Come quick for outside. He go die. You go hit him head. Finish. That's all. Dem no go squeeze you, Kuma. You get him for friend. He not be too much, master. Naira 50 last for you, customer. Make you bring money, master. Come. Naira 50 42. He not be too much now. You go hang them on the wall. He be nice, not so? His and her skins on the wall of the rec room, I think. My son's eyes that light up for sure. Then thought throws me another loop. He has to make a living. This is a big bite. No telling when the next meal it'd be. ID papers and bills stick out of my wallet like feet. Okay, I don't know what my time is like right now because my watch has died, so how am I doing? Got a few minutes? Wendy, how am I doing? Where is she? Okay? One more, that's what I thought. Okay, this is called Teima's Deplaint. Teima is another Yeti. It's a diminutive Yeti, about 5 feet tall. My latest book is called Cryptid Shindig. It's a manuscript I'm working on now about cryptids, which are hidden creatures that may or may not exist, for which there is evidence in the fossil record and lots of sighting reports like Ogopogo and Sasquatch. So this is another Sasquatch, okay? Only it's his point of view, and I thought, well, if we're going to talk about humanity here today, then let's take the point of view of the critter looking at us, okay? So Teima's complaint. Hey, you're the funky monkey, dude, so drop the fetid attitude. Gather your own poop in a group. It's bad enough you chop down our trees. What? We gotta get on our knees now. Genuflect at your starched human hems, praise Allah or some other abstract deity? Sorry, we're gonna pass on your theology. Swing from the trees with grace and ease, bongo beatnik pongoides. Stick that in your taxonomies. Tell Darman and St. Peter Miss Otis regrets she ain't gonna dine at either trough today. We're comping on a hairy hominid stomp. Gonna tromp out of the trees, grab a sheep, go on the lamb in a saucer bound for the Pleiades. Ain't no intelligent life on this planet, babe. You human beings haven't ascended no beanstalk as far as we can see. Your judgment's as clouded as the peak on Everest in a snowstorm. Got Yeti? Good for you. We prefer spaghetti. Tell the cryptobiologists we cryptid critters ain't quitters. We're bum thumping down the scree. Gonna drop off the keys, Euripides. Gonna ride a water slide wormhole out of here. Get ourselves free. We'll tell Elvis you said hey. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Calgary's Vivian Hansen now. She's published several books of poetry and wades deeply into bearing witness as often as possible. Her latest book is A Tincture of Sunlight by Frontenac House.
I've been doing this bearing witness thing for some time, having started some of my books early as a baby poet, working with my friend who died of AIDS 25 years ago, and also with the victims of Jack the Ripper. This most recent one is about Old Man, who's kind of a Forrest Gumpy kind of character, and these are his stories about his brethren whom he went to war with, once in Falaise under the direction of David Curry, who won the Victoria Cross. So this is a story about Falaise. For Frenchy Lloyd Laprade and George Noble, soldiers with the South Alberta Regiment at war, 1940 to 1945. Crushed against this bridge, the willow of his hard brown body immovable, the taste of old man in May, silver green and offering me tart willow, buds that drip from my hair, driving past the bridge, his scent. His alligator legs swell inside an old folks' home, a place poised at 11 a.m. every year to honor old soldiers. He's not unhappy here. The shadows outside his window hold mosquitoes that had an ancient pact never to bite him, the oldest of epidemiologists. Jackrabbits box outside his room at 9 p.m., and if I bring him wolf willow to yellow the room, the branch will speak of his beginnings. He slides his iron cross coup gold ring from his shrunken finger, gives it to me after all these years. Keep it safe. It wants to slide off my finger now. I'm afraid of losing it in the shower. Willows against a footbridge over pass, butter blooms in silver green, hard candy pebbles of sweet feral. And then he will be young man again, the soldier driving a tank over the beaches of Normandy in a second wave of condemnation. I feel a sacrament coming on. A ceremony that would efface the memory of George crooning, "Moonlight becomes you." 8 hours after they went AWOL for the night, and the Glaswegian sergeant major screaming. And this was the only fun part. Months before Noble got machine-gunned over an island in the Moss River, trying to save Frenchie, who was dead already. It was Valentine's Day, or so he says, but I checked the battle dates, and it was January 30th, 1945, Capelle-Chevrier, Holland. Noble tried to pull Frenchie free and got himself just as dead, his head nearly clean cut off by machine gun fire that hit the tank. Young man becomes old man, watching Noble retreat, fall back, blood fireworking from the throat that crooned, "Moonlight becomes you." And then I employ a section from the war diaries regarding Noble's death. The tank was the only one in the regiment that was fitted with an all-round vision copula, and because of this, the turret copula flaps were down, i.e. the turret was buttoned up. When the projectile hit, it wounded the co-driver, Trooper Leprade, L, M45749, and set his compartment on fire. The driver, Trooper Noble, GW, M45582, was quick to grab an extinguisher and put the fire out. He leapt out of his driver's hatch to find that the turret crew were unable to lift open their hatch. He pulled it open, allowing the boys to bail out, and upon returning to the front of the tank, found Trooper Leprade struggling to get out of his compartment. He jumped up on the hull and started to pull Leprade out when a burst of MG fire cut Leprade's head off. Noble was also hit in the head, staggered, and fell on the north side of the dike. The freezing of the dead was beneficial in the removal of men. George Noble's body was recovered from the base of the dike where he had fallen and taken back and buried with the other SAR fatal casualties after a service conducted by Padre Silcox. War Diary, January 30th, 1945. And pardon me, that was not Falaise, that was the Battle of Capelle-Chevrier. I caress the hot rosewood bowl, remembering his puff, smoke, rings aromatic, yellow July mornings. He gazes into prairie long grass, smoke curling into heat. The white churl of his thoughts, the roll of tongue and teeth and lips as riled as incense. Deft fingers puppeteering a scent, swallowing smoking words. For these piping moments he holds the summer sun. Seizes a rosewood day between his four front teeth and a full set of tobacco-scarred bottom survivors. He keeps his churl from rising to the full loft of the sky. And then he will be young man again, the soldier driving a tank over the beaches of Normandy in a second wave of condemnation. Thank you.
The university's own Ian McAdam is up next. He's taught early modern literature here for 23 years and has recently published poems in the Antigonish Review. Welcome.
This first poem is about bearing witness to mortality, which I think is obviously a pretty common theme in poetry, as we've seen here today already. This poem is called Victoria, 1977. We stood then in tender, uncomplicated grief, not yet knowing the thing worse than death, like a dark form outside a thin, white window of ice. That late spring day, we could barely read the blurred signs. The browning dogwoods, the cool green light, the indifferent birds flickering the white sky, heralding the near clear blue of the hot, sparkling summer. The scraping of the shovel cut only with momentary clarity through the weeping mother and father wobbling in their embrace. That scene would ripen, and after time would taste, as for me, almost sweet. The body in the vigorous soil would never grow old. Now I envy that young life, the lucky swerving into the wrong lane, the sudden apotheosis, the purification through the delicate filter of fresh flowered leaves above an innocent rural road. In freedom his spirit forever rising, forever on the verge of an endless sun of summer, above the last white winding sheet of cloud. This next poem is really just my version of the opening of The Wasteland, that April is the cruelest month. Though right now I don't think I agree with that, but anyway. It's called Calgary, 1987. In the city in early spring, twisted garbage melts into brown lawns. From graveled gutters, resurrected dust whirls into concrete corners. The first tulip, red lips, black mouth, black knob tongue, protruding life, obscenely defying, reifying my failure to choose this. I long for the white sheets of winter, covering the frozen pods of seeds. I want a clean stasis behind glass, with a view, a crystal gauze. Not the sweat and the tired retracing of steps on flaked pavement. Not the sky at evening stained with the mind's bruised desires, beyond the blue mountains, falling off northwest like the blind leading the blind. Shrive me, deliver me dust from the body of this death, till I face a garden worth the time of its growing. These next two poems are me deciding I would bear witness to mental trauma and mental illness. But then when I reviewed my own poems, it's a fairly common theme in my poetry, I decided that there's some things I couldn't bear to bear witness to. So I chose two poems that tackle that topic a little more obliquely. This first one is just really standing in middle age and looking back at youth and realizing how hard it is to grow up, and I don't know if anyone ever manages it entirely. So this poem is simply called Youth. In a weak white innocence I moved. The sky was never like a mirror, but only rose limitless and pure beyond the rim of all that inchoate and unchallenged minds contain. Leaden in winter, it covered me like a womb as I pocked the crusted field, venturing out to spread the tan seeds over the crystal snow. I watched the ruffled birds hop and peck their hurried meal, a whirl of gray and brown. Then at the pond's edge, I grabbed the slender trunks of alders and stamped the hard black ice, waiting for a crack or sign of weakness. Never did I dare to cross the center, never, though it beckoned me like a prize. Now, after years have brought me again and again the pain of thaw, I dream of that slab of ice turned slightly yellow, cracking, melting, and I feel perhaps the risk might have been taken, to drown and drown once only, settling on swollen roots of a thrilling spring. The next poem addresses mental illness a little more directly, but still metaphorically distanced. It's called Cousins. When your desires stretched too far, grew brittle and broke, you put the clarity of the saint like a precarious blown glass swan on a pond mirror, lying chill by the window with white curtains. Nothing moved in the sky, though the leaves clattered among the dried stems in the muddy garden. I remembered the musty box in the basement with a photograph of your young self bundled up like a chrysalis in the arms of a dead aunt and uncle beside an antique car half covered with piled snow. And the ice-choked puddles in the schoolyard, and the battered hedge with the garbage twisted round its roots, and the sickly yellow buds in the spring when the wind whipped the dust into our eyes. And I remember the hospital where I last saw you, gathering the white blanket around you, knowing it would soon be gathered tight around your neck, while I, with my own scars, would step back out, forever dodging the soiled patches of snow and the image of you. Okay, now I want to conclude with a brief little poem. It's really a slight little thing. That's why I call it a lullaby. For a couple of reasons, I want to prove that I can write poems that aren't totally about trauma and despair. And because it also gives me pleasure, so I'm hoping it'll give other people pleasure too. It's called Agate Lane Lullaby. Down Agate Lane to the beach at night, it was warm and blue, with white island lights reflected in shimmering lines across a glassy sea to me and me and me round the golden fire. We were young and drunk, and all of us knew that I was only you. We did not fathom our aloneness, the separating sea. At the center of B, we knew not seams, my warm blue night, my well of dreams. Thank you.
Okay, now for an accomplished performance poet who bears witness by telling it like it is, whether it's sad, silly, science, or even NSFW, which means not safe for work. Welcome, Calgary's Erin Dingle.
I put a lot of thought into what I bring for bearing witness. I bear witness in most of my writing, and a couple of things that came up for me that I'll address in the 3 pieces I'm going to do today. First off is the idea that when we bear witness, we need to consider the society we live in and the conditioning that we live under. Because I know a guy who should be an astronaut, not because he's a space cadet, but because in space, tears won't flow. Now, there are 3 types of tears. They're molecularly different. There is basal for lubricant, there's reflex for irritant, and there's emotional. But he only accepts the first 2. So salt heaps his pillar cheeks, his eyes crack Iceland volcanic, his face must ache like continents colliding because he swears at me. He calls me a useless hippie. His mission is control, alt, delete, grief. But you know, I'm always reflex crying, and then he gets Challenger explosive. For God's sakes, why are you women always crying? I don't cry because I have ovaries. I cry because bullies upset me. But I'm not allowed to get upset here, or our mutual cultural conditioning will label what I say irrelevant before I do or say anything. So let's ask science. Science says in North America, most women will cry 50 to 60 times a year, while most men will cry 5 or 6 times a year. And this isn't just hormones or genetics, though, because at birth, all our babies weep exactly the same. But by the end of the first week, they all have accents. See, distress meets cultural conditioning in 7 days. And by age 13, most of our Canadian boys are ashamed to weep at all. Even though tears, they're peace flags, they're compassion calls. Before the Industrial Revolution, when the bosses decided that feelings would slow factory productivity, we all wept equally together, less or more in our own ways. Because everybody cries. I mean, even gods cry. Hrothgar cried buckets. Jesus wept. The sun god Ra hummed bees into a tuneless world when his tears hit the sand. But these days, They say that most of us will only cry at home, at night, all alone. And science tells us that a good cry, it's an open, honest, willing cry. Alone or with others, it will produce oxytocin, just like laughter or exercise. But a bad cry, well, that's a stifled, unwilling cry, and it produces cortisol, just like anger. See, tears, they are not weakness. They are strength training. But my astronaut, he's received no training at all. So he's out there in the drink, in the anger. He is waving his fists and steadily sinking, and I want to save him. I'm desperate to save him, but you know, drowning men cannot be trusted. They will drag you under. So I tell him I cry because of synpropanethiol S oxide, although nobody is cutting onions here. We watch stars fall like lost astronaut tears. When he isn't looking, I wipe mine away. So the second piece with bearing witness is particularly in a time in the world where a lot of marginalized groups and a lot of people who have been silenced for centuries are finally finding space to speak up. It's really easy if you have privilege and if you are lucky enough to have not experienced things to kind of dismiss other people's feelings and be like, oh, it's not that bad. You know, you shouldn't be making such a big deal about this. And I think it's really, really important to understand the subjectivity of experience, and that, something that seems like a 3 on your pain scale is a 9 on somebody else's. And I've experienced this personally. Last night, I dreamt about the cat that I had when I was 6, the one that got hit by a car. He dragged himself home to die, and my sister and I found him in a streak of loss on our driveway. But I remember it most because my dad was actually nice to me. I woke in a soaked concrete panic, shouting and sobbing about this senseless, scalded childhood into the liquid center of another night, trying to stuff my child emotions back into my adult needs. See, I've struggled to get back up since my father died. A decade ago, I confronted him. He apologized. I wish that had been the end of it. But you don't understand. You didn't grow underfoot. So when I told you why I was crying last night, you said, that was 20 years ago. You need to get over it. We're talking 15 years in a split-level suburban coffin where they poked at me for the whine of escaping air. See, you don't understand. You were taught to stand. You were taught to stand up for yourself. You were taught to walk away from bullies. I was taught to live with them and apologize myself away. I was taught I was the smallest I, quilting myself back together after my pancreas died. This legacy is stitched through my fabric. I unpick one side at a time. We got 15 years waiting for a misstep to hit the missile floor beside his bed, waiting for her Achilles heel to strike a grenade couch. Yes, it was 20 years ago, but some days I'm still under it. And all I tasted was tombs last night, the raw of shovels digging under, and my palms can know those insult handles like old lovers. So when you said, get over it, I heard they were right. It wasn't ever that bad. I mean, they mostly only abused me emotionally, and that isn't what you meant. I know that now. But when I'm like that, that's all I hear. And I'm getting over it as quickly as I can. Redefining capital I is the work of a lifetime. I shouldn't have to justify this, because you don't just get over it. Recovery isn't purchased online. You don't get better. You earn it in its own time. And this isn't even about understanding, especially when most of it happened before I was old enough to understand or to rationalize. So when I slip beneath the scrapbook, I am a child again, tantruming and terrified, or trying to keep everybody happy so that no one else hurts me and I can sleep without dreaming about my dead cat. And the only training of 20 years ago that I seem to have entirely gotten over is the capacity to remain silent. So when you frustrated tell me, get over it, I reply, that's exactly what they told me too. Your feelings aren't valid, get over it. And I have actually gotten over my abused history enough to believe that I deserve better understanding and patience from my good friends. And on my white nights, I don't ever want or expect a white knight. I can rescue myself, but I do expect better than get over it.
Closing our readings today is Blaine Greenwood. He has just published his second book of poetry entitled The False Mirror, which will be launched in dynamic form at 6:30 this evening at the University of Lethbridge bookstore.
A few weeks ago, my wife and I came across the DVD Loving Vincent. And I had a chance 2 days ago to actually view it. I highly recommend it. My first poem is going to be about Vincent van Gogh and how that left ear left his head. There are things sinister in my mind. They crept in there through my left ear. This ear that hears those other things, like eyes that see what is not there. My dear Paul, your left ear hears the ancient secrets of Theo's sophistry, while mine hears nothing but the stiff winds of God's North Sea. I would seek the zephyrs of the south, paint boats upon an almost foreign beach. But damn you, Paul, you'd find your south in her, your 13-year-old tan Tahitian bride. There are things sinister in my mind. They crept in there through my left ear. This ear that hears those other things, like eyes that see what is not there. To me, Paul, you came like arrogant but cornered mouse, almost God to me. You angered me until December 23. When you stole my sunflowers, you stole me. You drove me mad, nay, murdered me. I wished to slit your throat, holding razor in my hand, but your eyes did break my mind, and I went home to the yellow house and took my left ear instead. There are things sinister in my mind. They crept in there through my left ear. This ear that hears those other things, like eyes that see what is not there. My left ear it did offend me much with talk that was not there. They will poison you, Vincent van Gogh, they will. Gauguin, he will, when the weather traps us in the yellow house. I lopped off the demented ear, sliced it from my life, wrapped it in handkerchief, and gave it to a pretty lady of my choice. They all came to see the bloody mess when Gauguin ran away. Blessed St. Paul would hold me tight within his arms. There are things sinister in my mind. They crept in there through my left ear. This ear that hears those other things, like eyes that see what is not there. What's really interesting is there's a doctor's report concerning how the left ear got cut off his head. And it may not have been Vincent van Gogh doing it. I'll leave you to figure out that mystery. There seems to have been a running theme here, at least sub-theme, of dealing with our mortality. And I hope this poem, at least the ending of it, causes you to sort of rethink life. It's a poem, it's a true story concerning Henri Matisse. and the 4 times in his life where he faced death, and what happened each time he faced it. You saw yourself as an invalid in a metal corset, yet you surround yourself with flower books. First, dying of appendicitis, your mother gave you paints and you found life. Then drowning in Goron, you learned to swim in oceans of color. Dying of cancer and that sleep that would not come, you found your scissors, your paper, and the syncopation of jazz. You suffer heart attack in Nice when the world begins to die as hydrogen bomb explodes in Bikini Atoll. And yet we look, we find no trace of dying in your work. We ask, where can the happiness be found now? And then we see you again with brush on fishing pole, painting the walls of your hospital room, and wonder about the vault of heaven when your brush touches it. One of the nurses working with Matisse realized this man was going nuts not being able to paint. She brought 2 fishing poles in, tied them together, tied the paintbrush on the end of the fishing poles. The entire room was decorated with Matisse paintings. I hope they saved them. I'm going to end with a poem that isn't by my own construction, but this happens to be Black History Month in Canada. And I have permission from Fannin Holland out of Toronto, a Black poet, to read this particular piece of work. When we're talking about bearing witness, there are some poems, and this being one of them, that when the witness is bared, it's awfully hard to go, no, don't want to know about this story. I will also preface this by saying I have a nephew who's just joined the police force in the city of Edmonton. I'm very proud of most of the police officers that are out there, but Fannin has an opinion about the ones who maybe need to leave the force. Dear police officer, I'm unarmed. Please don't tell me that you have a family you need to go home to, because I do too. Please do not tell me that you're just doing your job, because part of your job is to tell me why I'm being detained, why I'm being asked to exit my vehicle, and why I'm being arrested. If you cannot answer these questions, it is your job to let me go unharmed. It is also part of your job to treat me as if I'm innocent. It is not your job to prove that I am guilty, but it is your job to gather evidence, but only if you have my consent or a warrant. If you have probable cause, guess what? You still have to tell me. If I'm selling CDs or cigarettes on the street, it is not your job to kill me. If I'm at Walmart in an open carry state purchasing an air gun, it is not your job to kill me. If my son is playing in the park with a toy gun, it is not your job to kill him. If my daughter refuses to put out her cigarette, it is not your job to kill her. And last but not least, it is your job to apprehend those who break the law, even if that includes other cops.